conclusions that they draw in their individual statements. So the two conclusions Mr. Bhagwan identifies are set out at the end of his statement or affidavit, to which he appends his statement. The position is this, is that they come to those conclusions, and it is our view that we dispute those ultimate conclusions, but that it would be a rather futile exercise to have the witness come along and give evidence, and my saying, well, I disagree. And he says, well, I'm sorry, but that's my opinion, and that's the end of it. It seemed to us rather pointless. I am in a position to be able to make observations about their conclusions and why the court should not follow the particular opinion that's being advanced. And it seems to us a rather pointless exercise. As I say, a sort of tit for tat, yes, you did, no, you didn't type of response from two witnesses whom we are not in a position to be able to do more than that, other than to advance on behalf of our client why it is that we say those particular conclusions are not conclusions you should follow.
That sounds fine.
With that in mind, we are content to leave, if it meets with the court's approval, to leave those witnesses as they are. They will be statements appended to their affidavits, which you will take into account at the end of our submissions.
That sounds reasonable to me, and that's an acceptable way.
Good. Well, that means that we only have two witnesses then for the applicants, and that will, I hope, make things a little shorter and make up a little for the half hour that we've lost this morning.
Yes.
For which I'm extremely grateful to your lordship for allowing me to do it in this way.
No, that's fine. So I think what we'll do is we'll proceed till about 11:30, and then we'll take a short break.
Thank you.
I'm grateful, my lord. My lord, as I said, you should have before you two bundles as the hearing bundle. You will have my submissions there in a black bundle, and then my learned friend submissions. And he also added some additional authorities to the end of my bundle. Okay, I'm grateful. My lord, at tab 3, you will have the originating summons for this matter, and it shows that the enforcement authority is seeking to recover $314,950. Yes. So, my lord, with that said, we would like to call our first witness, and that is Detective Constable Shannon Trott. Yeah.
Do you want to angle him over here so we don't have to move the laptop? Give that please. You want to farm or swear?
I can start this one.
Okay. What does he write in?
Oh, okay. So this is my little one.
Yes.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. My Lord, may I have permission to remove my mask?
Yes, you can take it off while giving evidence.
Jerome, can you hear me?
Hello? Yes.
Okay. So, my lord, his affidavit can be found at tab 5.
Yes.
So, I tender him for cross-examination. His affidavit stands as his affidavit. So, his affidavit is at tab 5. His exhibits are at tab 6.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you. Mr. Trott, it might be helpful if you have a copy of your affidavit in front of you. I don't know if that can be arranged, please.
Yes, I have a copy.
Thank you. Yes. If you turn to the second page of your affidavit, I think you'll see that you set out the circumstances surrounding the convictions or the conviction of Wanda Bowen. Do you see that and how it comes about?
Yes, that's correct.
At paragraph 6H, which is at the bottom of that page, you say this: following a guilty plea of money laundering from Miss Bowen, the sum of almost 15,000 was forfeited pursuant to section 48A of the Act. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you help me, please, in this respect? Was it always the Crown's case, as far as you're aware, that the money belonged to Mr. Bulford?
I wasn't actively involved in the original investigation, and I came to the department afterwards. But my understanding was that initially the belief was that the money belonged to Ms. Bowen, and then through the investigation, the determination became that Mr. Bulford was connected to the money.
Well, I think if you weren't involved in the investigation at the outset, I can address these questions perhaps to Mr. To another officer in due course. I believe Mr. Ridley is going to be giving evidence, and
Yes, that's correct.
he's a better person to address that question to. All right, very well. Can I ask you this? Over the page, please, paragraph 9, you set out there a sum of money that was found on Mr. Bulford. Do you see that at the $10,040?
Correct.
Again, are you relying there on what you were told by others?
Yes. Again, I have spoke to Detective Acting Inspector Ridley in regards to this, where the money was located, how it was bundled. But yes, he was the one who actively searched Mr. Bulford for one of the offenses.
All right. Well, again, for the avoidance of any doubt, I'm going to suggest that the amount was actually just under $10,000. But again, you're not in a position to be able to assist us with that, and I'll ask that of Mr. Ridley.
Just from what I was informed, I was told it was over the 10,000 threshold, but he can answer that question directly.
Paragraph 12 of your affidavit, are you in a position, again, it may be that you're not, but are you in a position to explain to us why it was that Mr. Bulford was not charged with any of these offences until after Miss Bowen was convicted?
Again, I wasn't directly involved in the investigation.
I can address it elsewhere. You need to take it any further. I'll ask Mr. Ridley those questions.
Okay, then I can answer just from knowledge.
Thank you. Over the page, paragraph 16, please. How long have you been a police officer in Bermuda?
Since 2003.
Right. And are you aware of the frequency with which Mr. Bulford would be stopped by police or customs as he entered or left the country?
I can't speak to how often he was stopped by customs. I can say from my time when I worked as a firearms officer and when I worked in uniform, he was someone who I know had been stopped on occasions.
Forgive me if I press you a little about that. You say stopped on occasions. Is he someone that would have been of interest to the police whenever he was coming or going from the through the airport in Bermuda?
Possibly. It would probably depend on intelligence at the time and information. Again, if you're suggesting 10 or 15 years ago, I can't say what information would have been available at the time, but it's a possibility.
No, I follow that. But I mean, just in the time that you've been a police officer and dealing as you do with this particular case, he is someone that would have always generated interest in police in his comings and goings through the airport.
In my current capacity, if that's what you're asking, I would say he would be considered a person of interest.
Right, and he was likely in those circumstances to be stopped by police.
I can't say that. I believe that would depend on the information and intelligence. I can't say he would be stopped on all occasions. I can't say he could have been a person of interest.
You understand that somebody who leaves and/or enters the country can be stopped and asked a number of questions without any particular suspicion at all. That is a liberty that you enjoy, is it not?
Yes, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Officers at the United States Customs and Border Patrol do go through a series of questions. If somebody has been highlighted or through their questioning is believed to be suspicious, they can correct.
Tell me this, if you leave the country with more than $10,000 in your possession, is there a sign or a document that you have to complete?
Yes, there should be signage up in relation to the threshold. Until recently, you had a document which was the FinCEN form. I can't remember the number, but the FinCEN form basically indicates that, sorry if I'm speaking too fast, just let me know, indicates that you shouldn't carry more money than the $10,000 threshold. And now, when an officer from USCBP, as in currently maybe the last year or so, they would ask questions, and if they believe you're carrying the 10,000 threshold, they would present the form, whereas it used to be a mandatory form that you had to fill out prior to departing through the U.S.
Yes, I mean, there's nothing to prevent you from taking more than $10,000 in cash out of the country. It's simply a question of declaration.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. And what I want to ask you about then is that declaration. I mean, if one leaves the country, there is no form that is handed to you automatically, correct?
The FinCEN form at the time, if you traveled through USCBP, I believe he wasn't traveling through the States, so.
No, he wasn't. I should have perhaps precursed my questions about where he was going rather than assuming it. But I mean, we all know from your affidavit and elsewhere that he was traveling to the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Therefore, he clears customs in the United Kingdom.
That's correct.
And that is quite different from when you leave and go to the United States, is it not?
Yes, because the Customs and Border Patrol acts in their capacity before you enter the United States, whereas UK acts when you arrive.
You're clearing customs in Bermuda itself if you're going to the States.
Yes, the theory behind it is.
And you're given forms that you have to complete and so on, correct?
Yes, correct.
That does not apply when you're flying to the United Kingdom. Is that right?
Yes, I believe you would get those forms in the United Kingdom as opposed to.
So it's on arrival rather than departure.
Yes.
That ordinarily you would declare your position. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
As you understand it?
Yes.
And it follows from that, and I've been through the airport many times, and I've been racking my brains now that we've changed airports, but I've been racking my brains to remember whether or not there was any signage about that as you left the country, about whether you should declare more or less if you have more than $10,000 as you leave, as opposed to when you arrive. Do you follow?
Yes, I believe there was some signage in the U.S. side. However, I don't believe at the time. Well, again, I too far back for me to say if there was any in the British Canadian side. Not that I can remember.
All right. Thank you. Can I turn next, please, to your paragraph 18 in your affidavit? You make observations about Mr. Bulford being the holder of a Bermuda bank account. Do you know that to be the case?
Yes, I believe he had an active bank account. Again, I wasn't investigating, it was just information that I was informed about.
Well, you may or may not be able to help me in that case, but I mean, are you aware of what happens if significant sums of cash are paid into a bank account in Bermuda? What that is likely to trigger?
Yes, depending on the amount, it may be mandatory reporting of a SAR, a suspicious activity report.
Yes.
But I believe that would probably be also triggered depending on the expectations of money going into the accounts.
And are you aware that that banks are particularly jittery with cash sums being paid into their accounts?
I believe they do KYC, know your customer, due diligence. If you can prove that you have a cash-based business, indicate what type of sums of money should be coming into the accounts, that would suit that jitteriness that you speak of. There are a number of businesses that have cash-based accounts.
Yes, I'm sure. But if it's rather more haphazard, is it within your knowledge that banks might just simply close the account?
Again, as far as I know, it's not. They just simply close the account. They do KYC and due diligence.
All right.
They will begin to request documentation and evidence as to source of the funds, how they came about them, and how regularly they'll be depositing them. If they can prove that information and prove that the funds are legitimate, they should accept those funds.
Well, should and do is another matter, but perhaps you're not the best person to deal with that. Thank you. In your paragraph 19, you deal with the question of declaration, and I think we've covered that as best you're able. So paragraph 20, please. Can I deal next that with Crown and Anchor? Are you familiar with the arrangements at Crown and Anchor?
Yes, I do have some familiarity with Crown and Anchor.
Does that mean you've been there yourself and partaken of the activity?
Yes, of course.
So the layout then is there are a number of tables at which people can gamble.
Yes, typically there's several tables.
There are, as with all gambling, some people who like to put down $1 or $2 and others who are what might be described as high rollers.
Yes.
Are you aware that Mr. Bulford was someone who had such tables and has done for many years?
Yes, I have been on occasion cup match in Somerset and seen
him there,
and some of his associates at Crown and Anchor tables.
Can I ask you this? Is it the case, as far as you're aware, that his tables were unlimited? That is to say, people could gamble as much as they want with his assent.
I can't specifically speak to what the limits were on the table. I know he was known as a more high-end dealer where you can go with higher bets.
Right. And as with all gambling, the house always wins.
Yes, well, they say the house always wins.
Yes.
In preparation for this, we did do some research to see what the actual winning percentage was believed to be on a game of Crown and Anchor. And I believe it was a number less than 10%. I believe it was 8% is the expected winnings over time for a game such as Crown and Anchor.
11% of what?
So 8%. So essentially, in any form of gambling, there are odds of the house winning over time. So if you were to bet $100 over, say, 10 bets for $1,000, over time, 8% of that money would be eroded away, and that is what the house would win. That is the house always winning, that 8%. Over time, statistically, sometimes you lose, sometimes you win, but over time, over the greater amount of time, you would expect your winnings to relate to about 8% of the gambling that took place.
Where did you get this from, Mr. Trott?
It was an article that Detective Ridley had showed you, and we had spoke about in a little bit of detail.
Is that in relation to gambling in regular casinos?
It was mostly in relation to regular casinos.
Yes. Have you made any inquiry, or any of your colleagues made any inquiry, of the sort of percentage profit margin that one might gain? Well, I'm not sure about profit margin, but what sort of gain one might make for a day operating tables at Crown and Anchor? Have you made any inquiry of that at all?
I believe Detective Whitley was trying to make those inquiries.
Right, well, I'll ask him about it in that case. Yes. Lastly, I just want to ask you about your final paragraph, paragraph 23 of your affidavit on page 4. Can you help me about this? You say Mr. Bulford did not at any time provide any evidence to show that he planned to settle in the United Kingdom. Do you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Were you aware of the evidence that he gave at his trial?
Just the discussions that I had with the officers that were involved.
Well, I'll ask the question again. Are you aware of the evidence that he gave at his trial?
Which evidence are you speaking of? I wasn't at the trial, so.
Right. Well, that's the point. You see, I mean, well, you don't have to have been there. Most of your evidence is what you've been told by others. So I'm simply asking you this. You make the statement in your affidavit that Mr. Bulford did not at any time provide any evidence to show that he planned to settle in the United Kingdom. Do you know what he said in his own defense at his trial?
No.
Right. So there's no point in my asking you then.
Okay.
All right. But before you made that statement, didn't you think it would be wise to find out what his case about moving to the United Kingdom was?
It was my understanding that he believed through difficulties with the police, he couldn't end other lifestyle issues. He felt that he would be able to make a better life for himself in the United Kingdom. That was my understanding.
Well, that was the reason rather than the providing any evidence. But I've asked you the question I need to ask. And I don't think that there's anything else. Would you just give me one moment, my lord? I just need to make sure I haven't missed anything out. Yes, there is one other matter. Sorry, I wanted to ask you about this, please. It's not in your affidavit at all. Then there are two aspects that I need to cover with you. And you may or may not be able to help me. It may be Mr. Ridley that I need to ask, but I do want to ask you first, please. Firstly, one of the issues for police when considering money laundering and those involved in significant criminal activity is lifestyle, is it not?
Possibly. Yes, if
well,
they can show that they have a lifestyle that seems to be well beyond their means,
yes,
that is an indicator, if that's what you're asking.
That is what I'm asking, because I note from you.
Sorry to interrupt. I didn't hear that last question.
The question is in relation to lifestyle.
Okay.
And I note that your affidavit doesn't deal with it at all, does it?
Yes.
Can I take it from that there is nothing of any significance in relation to lifestyle that you would wish to bring to the court's attention?
I was not made aware of any other facts pertaining to his lifestyle, except for that he's believed to be a fisherman and owns a fishing boat.
Yes, he has a fishing boat. He's a fisherman. All right. The second matter I wanted to ask you about that is not contained in your affidavit is in relation to his telephone. Are you aware that his telephone was seized from him at the time when he was arrested at the airport?
No, I don't believe those facts came up.
I'm sorry?
I don't remember those facts coming up in our conversation. I do believe it was, but I can't be sure.
Well, can we take it this way, that given the nature of the allegation that was being made about money laundering, and that was associated with potential drug dealing, can we take it that if he had a telephone on him, it would have been seized?
I would have
And
expected
interrogated. And interrogated. Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, perhaps I'll ask Mr. Ridley a little about that. All right. Well, thank you very much indeed. I have no other questions.
Do you have any re-examination? No. In that case, thank you very much, officer. So what do we have next? Okay.
Waiting, please. And just read the following.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My name is Acting Detective Inspector Paul Ridley, and I'm currently based at the Financial Crime Unit of the Bermuda Police Service.
Yes, thank you.
To step back a little.
At the moment, all I can see is the top of your head. And perhaps with his lordship's leave, you might be able to sit down rather than standing so far away from the microphone.
Would you just like to speak, Sergeant Ridley, so just to test whether Mr. Lynch can hear you?
Yes, could you hear me, Mr. Lynch?
I'm afraid you're a little faint for me.
You can take off your mask when you're speaking.
I can speak up a little if that's okay.
Ah, that's better, Mr. Ridley. Yes, that's a lot better. Fine. Yes, you provided recently an affidavit over a few pages dealing with this incident. Can I just give me one moment, please, to turn up the appropriate pages?
Can you provide a copy to Sergeant Ridley?
Right there. Right there.
You append to your affidavit dated the 22nd of February of 2021, your previous affidavits in relation to this matter. But I want to focus, if we can, please, on the most up-to-date version. All right, can we do that, please? The facts that you set out in your earlier affidavits are not in dispute about the circumstances of the arrest of these individuals and so on. I want to ask you about some of the observations you make, all right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And can we start, please, at the second page of your affidavit, in which you, at paragraph 7, you identify a number of features, indeed, over the course of your affidavit, identify a number of features that you seek to bring to the court's attention as to why it is that the monies should be confiscated. Do you follow?
Yes.
So can I just deal with some of those? At paragraph 7, you say that the respondent advises that he had funds in question was locating to the United Kingdom. However, his British Airways itinerary included a return ticket, and we've seen the return ticket as an exhibit at tab 2 in my bundle. I think it doesn't matter. What I do want to ask you about, though, is that the return date was in fact 5 weeks later. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So on its face, it would appear that that Mr. Bulford was not going for a week or two, perhaps for a holiday, but for a much longer period of time. That much is self-evident.
Certainly for 5 weeks, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, and of course, two matters arise from that. Can I ask you this first of all? It's very often cheaper, is it not, to buy a return than it is to buy a single?
I believe it is, sir. I can't swear to that, but I believe it is.
Yeah, well, you and I both have experience, no doubt, traveling to London on many an occasion. And when we want to go one way, it costs more than coming back again. But either way, that is certainly not an uncommon feature. Would you agree?
Certainly, I don't speak personally, and I always get a return ticket. I'm able to talk about a single ticket, as I've never done it.
Very well. If you can't help, you can't help. But it is what it is. Secondly, it is very easy to change a return flight, or was then. Nowadays, we're limited in the number of times we can fly in and out of the country, but it is. There were daily flights.
At that time, so yes. And
you could change a flight, either bringing it forward or setting it backward with a phone call or even online.
With relative ease, so yes.
Yes. There may be a small fee, but it's not a big deal. Is that right?
That's right.
At paragraph 8, you say this: I was involved in the search for his luggage, which only amounted to a few holiday clothes. Can I ask you, first of all, there were 2 bags, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And when you describe a few holiday clothes, I mean, he had a good quantity of clothing with him. I don't want to start itemizing each piece of clothing, but he had a good quantity of clothing with him, did he not?
As memory recalls, sir, no.
All right. But he had 2 suitcases, do you agree?
Yes, sir.
One went into the hold and one he was carrying on the aeroplane?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Yeah, all right. Is it within your knowledge that it is not uncommon for Bermudians traveling abroad, whether to the States or to the United Kingdom, to take an empty bag or a larger bag than they necessarily need and purchase their clothes whilst they're there? It's cheaper.
I've heard that scenario being raised in maybe a US flight where there's going to be a short trip for shopping to return. I've never heard it for the UK side.
Oh well. At your paragraph 9, you deal with a search, and I want to ask you a little about that, please. First of all, where did you understand Mr. Bulford to live?
I can't think of the address off the top of my head, but it was a.
I don't need an exact address; it's not necessary.
Cambridge Road in Somerset.
Right. In the Cambridge Road area, you believed him to live there, did you?
Yes, sir.
And when was it that you carried out a search of his premises?
Whilst in custody, sir. I don't have the exact date with me.
No, well, let's see if we can try and focus on some dates, because he was arrested at the airport, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he was interviewed, correct?
Yes, sir.
What happened to him after that?
I would imagine that he was released whilst on bail, sir.
Yes, he wasn't charged, was he?
That's right,
sir. Whereas Miss Bowen was, as was Miss Brown.
I wouldn't have thought so. So money laundering charge would ordinarily go to the DPP for charge approval, so I don't think she was.
I'm not suggesting they were charged immediately. I should have made it clearer, but very shortly thereafter they were charged.
I believe so, yeah.
When I say shortly thereafter, there's a little schedule in our skeleton arguments, my lord. Yes. So paragraph 2 of that schedule, you'll see. I can put a date to you. It was on the 24th of June that they were charged with money laundering, about 3 months later, something like that. Is that right? Does that accord with your recollection?
That would have been around about the time, so yes, sir.
But he was not, was he?
That's right, sir.
bearing those dates in mind, when was it that you say you carried out a search of his premises?
Again, I don't have the date of the.
Or was it before or after the charge of Bowen and Brown?
I believe it would have been beforehand, but again, I can't swear to that because I don't have the dates available to me.
No. Well, can I put it to you in this way? His address was not searched until nearly a year later, or the address, I should say, was not searched until nearly a year later. Now, is that possible?
That's possible.
Right. The value to be obtained in searching his address nearly a year later, would you agree, is of less significance than it might have been had it been searched at the time?
Well, so if memory recalls, the trouble with that was that we didn't have that address at that time of his arrest. Otherwise,
forgive me for interrupting you. I'm not really interested in the reasons why. I'll come to that if it becomes necessary in a moment. The fact remains that the address was searched a year later or so, and the value to be attached to what might be found or not found there is of less value than had it been at the time, had it been searched at the time. Do you agree?
Agree, sir.
Thank you. All right. In relation to that address, was it, can you recall, an apartment in which a young lady was living?
No, sir.
No, you can't recall, or no, there was not a young lady living there?
There was no, certainly I didn't see any clothing belonging to any of the female there. I was quite certain that that address was occupied by Mr. Bulford.
Well, I'm sure you were, otherwise you wouldn't have searched it. You would have had no right to do so. Can I, though, just seek to understand, this was an address. First of all, was it an apartment rather than a house?
I remember being downstairs, sir, so very likely a downstairs apartment.
Right. And it was in Cambridge Road in Somerset. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I don't want to mention the woman's name, but does Keisha, her first name, does Keisha ring any bells with you?
No, I'm afraid it did not, sir.
All right. In any event, when you went there, there was no other person there. Is that right?
That's right, sir.
Did you also seek to search an address in Biggin Hill?
In where, sorry? In
Biggin Hill.
Beacon Hill?
Biggin, as in the airport in the UK. Biggin Hill.
I think you meant Beacon Hill, sir.
Do I?
Yes, sir.
Oh, maybe. Beacon Hill then.
As in Lighthouse Beacon.
All right. Well, then it's my understanding of
Yes, sir. Beacon Hill.
Accent. All right. All right. Beacon Hill. Did you search or attempt to search an address at Beacon Hill?
Yes, sir.
And did you fail to search that address on the basis that the occupier said he didn't live there?
I'm trying to recall, sir.
I know it's a long time ago, but then, you know, you're bringing this action, not us.
I can't remember, sir.
In any event, you're aware, are you, that Mr. Bulford had a fishing boat?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that he used to, from time to time, live on his fishing boat?
I'm not aware of that, sir.
Are you saying you don't know that it happened, or or you're saying it didn't happen?
I don't know if that happened.
All right. When you searched that address in Cambridge Road, you in your paragraph 9 refer to a couple of videos that you found. I'm not sure how much significance to attach to this, but in any event, would you agree with me that they were part of a very large, or say a large collection of CDs or DVDs, I should say?
No, sir. As I remember, there was only 2 CDs.
Was there?
Not as a large collection as you have outlined.
Right. So you're saying it was just a few, and these two happen to stick out in your mind?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right. I'm going to make it clear so that we do understand each other, Mr. Ridley, that there was a significant collection of DVDs, of which these were but two. All right. Next, this, please. You say that at the address you located a navy blue anti-ballistic stab-proof vest. Is that right?
Yes, I did, sir, yes.
Did you seize it?
I think, no, we did not, sir.
No.
It wasn't certainly evidence of any crime.
No, indeed. I suppose somebody who might be bringing large amounts of cash back from a Crown and Anchor late at night might want to protect themselves.
I don't know what to say about that, sir.
No. I make it clear again so that we're clear about it. It is not accepted for a moment that this was his or had anything to do with him. But can I ask you, it wasn't seized, so it follows from that no DNA evidence was obtained from it to see whether or not it was his.
Again, sir, it wasn't seized, so no.
No. All right. And you observed that at that address, some of the windows had bars on. I think it's a lower ground floor apartment. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And therefore relatively easy, I suppose, for the would-be burglar to break in at a ground floor level. You're the policeman, not me.
But
well, it's easier than the first floor, isn't it? First floor in
Yes,
English terms is on the next floor up. All right. You then deal, well, can I ask you, first of all, before I move on from that, would you agree with me that this is a modest apartment?
yes, sir.
Was it 1 or 2 bedrooms?
I believe there was 1 bedroom, sir.
Yes. And are you aware that at that time, Mr. Bulford had a van that he used to drive?
I was not aware of that, sir.
And looking at that apartment as you did, and you'll appreciate that I'm suggesting this is an apartment in which a young woman lived, from which he visited from time to time. But leave that to one side for the moment. In this apartment, there were no obvious lavish trappings, were there?
I think I'd agree with that statement, sir, yes.
And just so that I'm clear, there was a CCTV camera fitted, was there?
Yes, sir.
Did you see if it was connected to anything?
It was connected, sir, but not recording.
Right.
So it was a live feed rather than a non.
Right. So something you could look at on a screen if you wanted to.
Yes, sir.
Was it remote, or was it only within the building?
I'm not sure. I think it was only within the building,
Yes.
but I'm not 100%.
All right. Can we move on then, please? Paragraph 11, you deal with Miss Wanda Bowen agreeing to transport his funds and was not offered any payment. That's what Mr. Bulford's account is. You say that she, in her affidavit, or rather in the affidavit that he appends to, there were certain comments made during sentencing.
Yes.
Remarks, yes?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure how much weight to attach to that, but let me ask you this, please. Mitigation is advanced by counsel on behalf of their client on the instructions of their client. And that would be Miss Bowen in those circumstances, wouldn't it?
Yes, sir.
And mitigation is advanced by that particular defendant at a time when they anticipate a sentence about to be passed.
Yes, sir.
And they may or may not be economic with the truth, and may or may not seek to put their own position in minimizing their own involvement in any particular crime.
I'm not sure whether I'll be able to speak to that, sir.
No, perhaps not. But one would have to be very circumspect to rely on what a counsel is saying on behalf of a defendant in mitigation at a hearing of sentencing, wouldn't one, as a police officer?
Perhaps also, yes, sir. I mean, I wasn't present during Miss Wanda Bowen sentencing, but
what you've done is to identify a passage in the transcript that's been appended, and I'll deal with that later on. But you simply seek to identify a short passage as to what was advanced on her behalf.
yes, sir.
Yeah. You're not able to say whether that is true or not.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
You also say at paragraph 13 that the suggestion was made that a ticket was purchased for her. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
That's certainly what was again advanced by her counsel. But even that wasn't suggested, was it, that the ticket was purchased for her by Mr. Bulford?
I can't speak to that, sir. I'm not aware.
Well, what you can say is, I mean, you're the one who's identified it as being an important or relevant factor. What I'm asking you is this, is that in that transcript, which you focused upon, counsel was saying that she had had the ticket purchased for her.
Yes, sir.
But he wasn't saying it was Mr. Bulford who purchased the ticket for her, was he?
I have the relevant page there. Would you like me to take a moment to refer to?
Well, I mean, you can take it from me or not. I mean, we can turn to page 37 if you wish. If you turn to in your bundle, page 37 of the transcript.
Note that the top paragraph refers to a friend. It doesn't name Mr. Bulford.
No, quite. That's the point I'm making. I mean, she part of her mitigation was she'd been going through some hard times. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, and she'd been offered a trip to the UK, correct?
Yes, sir.
And against that background, she was advancing, or counsel was advancing on her behalf, that a person, a friend, had purchased the ticket to allow her to go to the UK, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. It wasn't being suggested that that was Mr. Bulford who was paying for her to come to the UK.
And read the narrative, no, sir.
No, and what was being suggested was that Mr. Bulford asked her to carry the money for him and come to the UK when she goes to the UK with him.
Are you referring to a specific item within the narrative, sir?
Well, I mean, I don't want to read the whole narrative. The upshot of it was that she was asked to come to the UK. Some friend purchased the ticket for her to allow her to be able to do so.
Yes.
And Mr. Bulford asked her to carry the shoes which contained the money for him. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Can you just pause for 1 minute, please? I want to just find something else. Can I ask you next, please, to help me about this? Are you aware that a telephone was seized from Mr. Bulford upon his arrest?
Yes, sir.
And that telephone was presumably interrogated by the police.
Yes, sir.
Because it is often the case, isn't it, that telephones can be quite revealing about the relationship that a particular individual has with either other drug dealers or suppliers or other persons of interest to the police.
Yes, sir.
I can't hear you.
I was going to say that, sir, if you were going to ask me about content, I don't know the results of that telephone analysis.
Well, what I am going to ask you is this: is that there is nothing contained in your affidavit which suggests that there is anything of any use for the purposes of this court in determining his involvement in drugs.
Yes, sir, that's correct. There's nothing in my affidavit.
Nothing to show that that telephone was connected in any way with persons in the Caribbean or in the United Kingdom who were of interest to the police.
Again, specific to my affidavit, that is correct, sir.
Yes. Well, you're not keeping it a secret, are you?
I'm just not aware, sir.
No. Well, you'll forgive me, officer, but Mr. Ridley, you've been asked to make an affidavit in the last week or 10 days to support the case made by the Crown that Mr. Bulford is a drug dealer and that these are the ill-gotten gains from that drug dealing. You understand that, don't you?
I do understand.
Yes. And such evidence that the police are in possession of that would support that conclusion have been presented by you and other officers.
Yes, sir. But by the same token, my role is not the analysis of the telephone.
No, I'm not suggesting it is. I would hope that at your rank, you would have other officers who would do that.
Yes, sir.
But you're nonetheless the officer to be appraised of the results of such inquiry, are you not?
I think there was a different officer in the case, sir. Not myself, but I would have been, to your point, I would have been appraised. Yes.
Well, I mean, the point of you giving this evidence is to assist the court in trying to find material that would support the case for the applicant.
Absolutely, sir. I'm trying my best.
And of course you are. We know each other well enough, Mr.
Yes.
Ridley. What I'm simply asking you is that there is nothing that you've been able to advance that emanates from that telephone.
I don't mean to be a stickler, sir, but speaking personally, and that's obviously my own knowledge about the telephone, you're absolutely right. Can I go wider than that? I cannot.
All right. Just give me a moment, please, again. Tell me a little, please, about a computer system called AS400.
Yes.
I think I've got that right.
The AS400, I think it's still quite widely used in government, but it's a non-Windows database that is no longer used by the BPS, which is used...
Pause there for a minute, because you're a little bit faint and I can't quite hear you. I thought you said it's no longer used by the BPS. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm just focusing on what it was used for at the time. Am I right in assuming this was a database which contained information of use to the police about individuals and their activities?
Not as an intelligence database, but as an event recording database, yes, sir.
Yes, sorry, I followed that. Obviously, it would record important, or I shouldn't even use the word important, but it would record events of value to the police to give background information.
It actually records every single event regardless of severity.
Just give me a moment. I want to write that down. It actually records every single event.
So dogs barking, that would be an event to the most serious offences.
Right. And just so that we understand how this works, let us take a ludicrous example. I am a person of interest to the police because of my activities. And as a result, every time I am spotted in a particular location or with particular individuals, that would be an event.
No, sir. Potentially, sorry. So it's not used as a Paul Ridley was spotted wearing a red T-shirt, but if that particular area was targeted as a particular hotspot, for example, for that month, then it may have resulted in an event where Paul Ridley is recorded as being in that.
Right. So seeing me wandering around the front street of Hamilton wouldn't necessarily record an event.
No.
But if I was in Woodies and believed to be associated with the MOB gang, that might or should.
And there'd probably be a little bit more to that, like that particular event was a hotspot, for example.
Yes. So once, I mean, we know, don't we, even if our Chief Justice doesn't, that Woodies is a well-known location for potential gang members in relation to the MOB gang. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Sorry, to go back to the S1 Reddit, to sum up, it really is a call for service database. So not as an intelligence, a call for service, a call for police service. Were it something that required a police response?
Did require or didn't?
Would require.
Would require. Are you sure about that?
Yes. So for instance, again, the dog's barking. The event would be recorded, but ultimately, the police comm-ops would then decide whether or not it required a police response. But nonetheless, that event would still be on file.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It wouldn't necessarily mean that there was an actual response at all. Jerome Lynch has been seen at Woodies. He's believed to be an MOB member, and that might be recorded.
But no, sir, that wouldn't be an event. The fact that Paul Ridley was found at Woodies wouldn't be an event. That would be on a separate intelligence database. And say that wouldn't be a call for service unless the police attended.
I wonder if you can help me in that respect. Can I ask you to have a look, please, at I'm going to ask you to look at Mr. Rollins' affidavit, because he has a table within it which is lifted from the AS400. Right. So I just want to ask you if that accords with your recollection of what it would look like. So I don't know if you've got it there, you probably haven't. But Mr. Rollins provides a
Which
affidavit.
tab?
I didn't hear you, Lordship.
Which tab?
It's a tab. Oh, mine's in a separate bundle. Just a moment. It's in tab. It's bundle 2, and it's tab.
It's tab 14, I understand.
Yes, thank you. Forgive me.
Yes.
Yes. If you become, have you got a copy of it? Thank you. Skip the affidavit, skip the first statement that he appends to his affidavit, and go to the second one. And I'm not going to ask you anything about what he says. I'm simply asking you to have a look at the chart that he has included in his witness statement that presumably was prepared for some trial purposes. All right.
I have a page with numbers 25 written on the top right.
Yes, correct. Thank you very much. This is a statement dated the 30th of August of 2012. And you see at the bottom of that page and over onto the second page is a table that he has put in his statement. Do you see that? And this is when the AS400 was in operation, isn't it? Because we're dealing with, as I say, a period of 2012.
Yes, yes, it would.
Yes. Thank you very much. And just so that I'm clear, so that everybody understands, there's been some redactions from that particular table. Do you see? and the redactions are obvious where there have been redactions. Yes?
Yes.
I'm not really interested in running through with you, if I may say so, in each individual citing. I'm not going to be asking about it. I just want to understand how it operates, do you see? Because it may be that I have misunderstood it, and if I have, I want to be clear. Just looking over onto the second page, do you see that for an entry the 12th of November of 2010, Mr. Bulford is cited?
Yes, sir.
Do you see that? There doesn't appear to be any redaction there at all. And it just has that date with Cambridge Road, Sandys.
Yes, sir.
Yes?
I see it.
So obviously something has happened to generate that entry. Correct?
Yes, sir.
But there's nothing more added to that entry, is there?
I agree.
Right. So when one goes to that entry for intelligence purposes or background information, all that one would have is the individual reference on that particular line. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that incident could be much wider, and we don't know from what we see here.
That's the point I'm making. We have no idea what it relates to. So that's what I was going to ask you. Is there, for example, in addition, and which might have been cut off from this, for all I know, but that's what I need to ask you, is would there have been a reference in that entry to a police officer or an individual who has reported it?
It would have been, yes, sir.
So we don't have that information. Is that what you're saying? It's been cut off here.
I can't say it's been cut off. I'm saying that from a very small box that I can see, the information, I don't know any more information than what you already can see.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I just want to be clear as to where my understanding is that contains everything for that,
But
for example, for that entry.
I'm sorry?
For that entry, we have everything that is recorded on the AS400.
I don't know that, sir. And that would be very surprising to have a two-letter, a two-word entry in an AS400.
All right. Okay. Well, maybe we're going to need to do something else. But when you look at this, just casting your eye down it for the moment, please, officer. Yes. Does this look to you like what you would see if you put it on the screen?
No.
It doesn't?
It looks like a summary.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. And again, so that we're clear about it, the AS400 is available to all police officers. Is that right?
Yes, sir. At that time, like I said, it's not available to...
No, it's finished now, isn't it? You're using a different system now. I understand that. But I mean, at the time, this was a sort of background information database that was available to all police officers.
It's not background information, a call for service.
All right, call for service. All right, okay. Yes. Make sure I've covered everything for you. Nothing more there. Can I ask you, please? I'll ask you a little about the just give me 1 minute, sorry. I don't need to ask you that. Thank you very much. And I think we are there. Just give me one further moment. Yes. Lastly, this. Are you able to tell us or help us, please, as to why it was that Mr. Bulford was charged after the sentencing of Miss Bowen? Why was there no trial for them all together?
I believe it was due to the weight upon DNA evidence.
You were awaiting DNA evidence?
Yes, sir. I believe that a profile was extracted, and that's the reason why, this is my understanding, so it may not be 100%. But having lifted a DNA profile, I've yet to send that overseas.
There was a DNA, there was an attempt to find a connection between the packages and Mr. Bulford, was there not?
Yes, sir. Sorry, when you say attempt?
Well, the police were seeking to obtain evidence to suggest, to demonstrate that the packaging had been in some way handled by Mr. Bulford. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's right, sir.
But was it not your understanding that he had not denied his, I see you're shaking your head, you're anticipating my question. Was it not your understanding that it was not suggested that it was anything other than his money?
Mr. Bulford exercises right of silence, sir.
I didn't hear the answer, I'm sorry.
Mr. Bulford exercises his right of silence.
Yes. Just give me a moment, because I think that I have something I want to ask you about in relation to that, Mr. Do I understand the position to be this then? That but for the finding of DNA evidence on the wrappings of the money that was seized from Miss Bowen, that but for that, he would never have been charged?
I can't say that, sir.
Sorry, I didn't hear that question. Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
But for the DNA evidence, Mr. Bulford would not have been charged.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. There's no other questions I have.
Mr. Ile-Francois, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Suddenly, I believe that American mentioned something about Beacon Hill.
Yes.
Are you able to tell us who you live?
Sorry, I can't hear the question being asked.
So I had asked, he had indicated, queried him about Beacon Hill. And I'm asking him, did he know who resided at that residence?
I believe it was a family member of Mr. Bulford, but I'm not certain who.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Say that again.
I believe it was a family member of Mr. Bulford, sir. But I can't go into any greater depth because
Now, you said that you didn't have the Cambridge Road address. At what point did you get that address?
I believe that during the time that Mr. Bulford returned into police custody, I believe he was rearrested upon the DNA evidence. Police came into information to suggest that that's where he resided. So it was whilst in custody upon his second arrest.
And upon receiving that address, what did you do there?
Having searched the property, I honestly can't remember.
Okay, I'll put it a different way. You attended the residence?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And my learner friend asked you about CCTV.
Yes.
What, if anything else, did you notice at that residence?
I noticed there to be a driver's license in the name of Mr. Bulford in a bedside drawer. small amount of currency within that drawer. See the bars, CCTV, the vest.
What, if anything, can you tell us about the bars?
The bars were only in that bedroom, in that one bottom apartment room. They were steel bars. Much like old type prison bars, you know, the vertical steel bars.
And what, if anything, can you tell us about? Can you tell us if this is like a common occurrence? What, if anything, can you tell us about?
I can't hear the question. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I asked my learned friend about having seen the bars. What, if anything, what, if any, observations did you make about the bars?
That was the only room where I saw the bars in, and it struck me as noteworthy because I hadn't seen that before. I've been involved in quite a few search warrants, and very rarely do I get to see bars on windows.
Now, my learned friend asked you about Wanda Bowen, and he indicated that she simply referred to a friend at her sentencing. Now, as an officer, what, if anything, can you tell us are the main reasons why persons would not name an individual that asks them to carry specific contraband?
The main reason that instantly comes to mind is through fear of intimidation or reprisals. There is a code of honor that once in police custody, you don't talk to the police.
Now, my learned friend indicates in your affidavit there is no mention of drugs. If you can just have a look at your affidavit. If you look at paragraph 17. Now, what do you refer to as that?
Yes, ma'am, it's a reference to the statement, to the affidavit of Detective Sergeant David Bagon, who makes comment on a belief that the funds were derived from the sale and distribution of controlled drugs.
And what would be your reason for mentioning that in your affidavit?
From a proceed the crime point of view, it's very applicable in so much that we know that Bermuda is not a drug producing country, and in order to keep the drug enterprise going, there has to be an expenditure, you know, to purchase the drugs, which in turn meant that they were able to be brought back in through sales.
Well, here's my question.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Sergeant Riddler. Thank you very much. What's next? Have we finished the witnesses?
We have finished the witnesses, so I don't know if your lordship wants to take a break at this moment.
I think that this would be a good time to take a 15-minute break, and so we will resume at 11:35. Can you let Frank know? Yes, thank you very much.
I'm grateful. Is this recorded? Is it recorded?
Not like
Aye.
Okay.
Good day, Mr. Lutz. How are you doing? Can you hear me?